The Tampa Bay Lightning are getting back to practice today, so we'll get back to some Bolts business here on another episode of Locked On Lightning. We'll chat about how well the Lightning have positioned themselves for the playoffs and some unsung heroes from the pre-Four Nations part of the NHL season. Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. I'm Josh Sperber, thanking all of you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if your team is the Tampa Bay Lightning, then this is the show for you. We're going to start off with the Tampa Bay Lightning, kind of a bit of a state of the first half of the season and how well they have set themselves up for the postseason. Because I think if you look at where the Lightning were at the beginning of the season, relatively new roster, definitely a lot of moving pieces in their offense. The expectations were not very high for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And if you look at where they started, where they were at the beginning of the season, I think this is probably the best case scenario in terms of predictions for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, if you picked the Lightning to make the playoffs, you're looking really good right now, which is great because I've always wanted to look good at something. Because I did think the Lightning at the beginning of the season had a playoff chance, but they needed some things to go right. They needed some of the new pieces on their team to mesh really well together. And they needed to pick up some key divisional wins against some of the up-and-coming teams. And I think especially in the last couple weeks of the season, the Lightning really did that with a 4-game win streak, all against the Atlantic Division, helped put the Lightning from 5th place into 3rd place in the Atlantic Division. And those 4 games was part of really the biggest stretch of the season for the Tampa Bay Lightning, calling the 2 home games nearly back-to-back, played with a day apart of each other on Tuesday and Thursday, the week before Four Nations against the Ottawa Senators. That was consistently called a playoff series by the Lightning players and coaches, and they certainly treated the next 2 games on the road against Detroit and Montreal as playoff games as well. And I think if you just look at those 4 games, the most important games of the season for the Lightning, 4 games in a row against the Lightning's division, the longest successive stretch of the Lightning playing against Atlantic Division teams. These were must-win games. These were make-or-break kind of games for the Tampa Bay Lightning season, and they won every single one of them relatively convincingly. I mean, these were games where the Lightning led for the majority, if not all of the way, in all 4 of those final 4 games on their tied season-long 4-game win streak. Of course, the important part is that they're all against a division that helped the Lightning bump up in their playoff spot, but it really just solidified what was a solid first half and change of the season. I mean, if you want to call it a first half of the Four Nations break, whatever, but the Lightning, I think, have really gotten to that point better than a lot of people thought they would, and frankly, in the best position that I think they could be in, because at the beginning of the season, even now, as the season is worn on, despite the fact that the Lightning are only 5 points behind Florida for first and 2 points behind Toronto for second, it still seems like there's a divide between the Lightning and at the very least the Maple Leafs. The Bolts have split 2 games with their rival Florida Panthers so far this season, but the Toronto Maple Leafs have beaten the Lightning all 3 times in which the 2 teams have played this season. So there still seems like somewhat of a disparity between the Lightning and the Maple Leafs. It seems a bit closer to Florida, but the Panthers are currently the team that is leading the Atlantic Division. And obviously, I think the Florida game brings a little extra out of these Lightning players. They understand the rivalry component of it and understand how important those games are. So I think regardless of the fact that Florida is the defending Stanley Cup champions right now, as much as it pains me to admit, you have to consider Florida one of, if not the best team in the NHL right now, though they are closer to last in terms of first place points among the first place teams in the National Hockey League. But, those are 2 really good teams that I think a lot more things have to go the Lightning's way for them to catch it. They'll need, an advantage on wins with Florida and Toronto for the rest of the season. They'll essentially need to win out against those teams anyway. So 1 more game against Toronto would need to be a win. 2 more games against the Panthers would need to be wins as well. But I think that the Lightning are just at the highest point of what I think you could realistically expect from a team that changed as much as it did over the course of the offseason. Because, look, like, we know the Lightning core has been there. But, I mean, you look at the Lightning roster, you look at a lot of the key players that are featured for Tampa, particularly on defense, it's about half and half. On the offensive side, obviously, Jake Gensel replacing Steven Stamkos is huge. Cirelli and Hagel have emerged as star players. J.J. Moser has been a new addition to the Lightning line, while Ryan McDonagh is a new addition. Technically, he has played with the Tampa Bay Lightning before, and Emil Lilleberg coming in as a full-time Lightning player for the first time this season, after Lilleberg was with Tampa on a two-way deal last year, played in 37 games and recorded 5 assists, and is now one of the Lightning's line 3 defensemen. So a lot of new names. Every single defensive line had at least one new player on it. Again, McDonagh and Cernak were already line mates previously in McDonough's first stint with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So again, a new addition, not technically a new player. And then on the offensive side, Mitchell Chaffee played 30 games for the Bolts last season. Connor Geekie, now down with the AHL, was a big part of the Lightning's offense for a while. Mikey Eyssimont, Gage Gonzalez, Mitchell Chaffee, these are all players that didn't have as big of a role with Tampa as they did last year. And I mean, the fourth line, whether that's Atkinson and if it's usually Gergensons, Atkinson, and Luke Glendening, there's only one returning Bolt from last year's Lightning line. And Eysimont's getting a lot more time. Gonzalez has become a key part of the Lightning team. The Lightning, they added so many pieces and made so many changes, and obviously changing captains. Losing a captain is never an easy thing, I think, to get over. But that's what happened to the Lightning. I feel like they went through just as much, if not more, changes than really any other team in the NHL last year, and they were still able to turn it around and, play like they're one of the top teams in the league. And I think credit there has to go to John Cooper for really keeping, the Lightning ship straight, and Victor Hedman as well, stepping in as the new captain and providing the same kind of level of leadership. I mean, I think with Hedman as an alternate captain for so many years underneath Steven Stamkos, him getting the chance to spread his wings as a captain is probably the best case scenario for the Lightning. I mean, it would be one thing if Hedman had to leave for whatever reason too, and the Lightning would have named maybe a Ryan McDonagh captain, if not Nikita Kucherov, the other two Lightning alternate captains. But I think the Lightning leadership from Victor Hedman, as we talked about on yesterday's show, really has to be considered a major factor in how great the starting to the Lightning seasons has been, because it's not easy to lose a captain who had been a Lightning captain for almost 10 years, maybe more, with Steven Stamkos, and to have him replaced by a guy who understood Stammer's leadership style and was frankly somewhat part of it when he was the alternate captain. And he's been with the Lightning for a while. He has known how the team works. I mean, I don't think there was a better choice for that Lightning captain position. And I think that is evident on the ice, because if you play harder when you have a unified team, united under a strong leader and a strong group of players. And that's exactly what Victor Hedman is for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Not just one of the best defenders in the NHL and a certain Hall of Famer, but also he is a guy who the players can respect as not just a talented player, but also as a leader who can help get the best out of some of these guys. So I think Hedman moving to captain was just certainly great. The Lightning, for the most part, have picked up a lot of games that they really, I think, needed to win. It's definitely been more of a later in the season development. Obviously, a couple early losses to Toronto and some other divisional teams, but the Lightning really picked up the slack with that Atlantic Division sweep in the final 4 games heading into 4 Nations. And now the Lightning will go out west for a Western Conference slate when they return to Amalie Arena. The next 3 games for the Lightning are at home, starting on Sunday with a date against the Kraken, a day later at home against Edmonton, and then at home against the Calgary Flames, as the Lightning finish off February with games every other day on the final week. Which one of these games is going to be the most important to the Tampa Bay Lightning as they continue on the rest of their NHL season? Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1-ounce serving of Wonderful Pistachios has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better-for-you unsaturated fats to help keep you fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shells variety. It is the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. When I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snackin' and get crackin' with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. And we are back. The Tampa Bay Lightning are not back just yet, but they will get back on Sunday, starting off with a game against the Seattle Kraken. Obviously, the Lightning as a team certainly look at games, one at a time. I get to look at the games a little bit more objectively because the Lightning have 3 teams coming to Amalie Arena to try and extend their season-long win streak, second 4-game win streak of the season, to 5 games for the first time this season against the Seattle Kraken. You're facing 3 teams that are in the playoff hunt, though the Kraken a bit further on the outside in 7th place in the Pacific Division, 11 points behind the 4th place Vancouver Canucks for that final playoff spot. In the Western Conference, the Calgary Flames a little bit closer. That is the Thursday game on the 27th. And then the Flames in 5th place, 60 points, 3 games behind the Canucks for the 5th spot in the Pacific Division. And the number 1 team in that Pacific Division, the Edmonton Oilers, is the team that we are going to be spotlighting. It is the 2nd game for the Bolts after the 4-nation break at Amalie Arena on Tuesday, February 25th. And to me, that is the most important game for the rest of February for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Obviously, the most important games of February have already been played. The Lightning won all 4 of those. Back-to-back wins against the Ottawa Senators at home. Wins on a back-to-back against Detroit and Montreal the next 2 games after that. Now the 4 nations break, and I think Seattle is certainly an important one. You want to get back onto the good foot and keep the momentum going at home after a really strong end to the first half of the season. But when you just look across the ice, the Edmonton Oilers, I think, are the only playoff team of these 3 that the Lightning will be facing. And that's a matchup that you're just simply going to have to keep your eyes on. The Oilers have the leading scorer in the NHL in Leon Draisaitl. He'll be matched up against that Lightning first line with Connor McDavid, who's got a goal in each of the last 2 games of the 4 Nations Faceoff, one of the best players on planet Earth. He and Nikita Kucherov will certainly have that make for some interesting hockey. That's going to be always fascinating to watch when the 2 teams go against each other. And, that I think is enough just to qualify it matchup wise. But more importantly, the Lightning got back into the playoffs after a strong end of the first half of the season. And this is their biggest test post 4 nations in their most immediate test, I should say, and one of their biggest over the rest of the season. I mean, right now, Edmonton through 55 games, 34-17-4, 72 points, technically a lead over Vegas, who has played 1 more game than the Edmonton Oilers, 1 fewer and 2 more overtime losses for the Vegas Golden Knights. So they're technically in 2nd place by a small margin. And the Lightning coming back, I don't want to say it's not a test against Seattle. The Kraken certainly played the Lightning well the last time these 2 teams played each other. But the Lightning came out on top of that one. The Lightning are looking for that sweep against both Calgary and Seattle, which is another reason I think that Edmonton game especially is a bit more important. These are two teams that the Lightning have already beaten on the road. So coming and beating them at home, hopefully, is the easy part for Tampa. And the Kraken are a bit on a downturn right now. And with a rested Vasilevsky going up against them, that could be a good one. And the Lightning scored 8 goals against the Calgary Flames in Calgary, 5-goal win there, a 4-goal win in Seattle for the Bolts. So those are two teams that the Lightning have not had all that much difficulty with. But when you look at Edmonton, it was a 2-1 loss for the Lightning in December 10th. That was when it was just a difficult time for Lightning players. They were just shooting a ton of shots, and it just didn't seem like they were falling. The Bolts only managed 22 shots on net in the loss in Edmonton back in December. And that certainly hurt the Lightning's chances in that one. And I mean, this is a game that, you'd like to see get redemption from. You'd like to see the Lightning playing against the same team that already beat them and then coming back and then beating them again, like they have done a couple times over the course of this season. Finally getting that win over Montreal on February 9th, right before the Four Nations break, was certainly big for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Maybe even the best possible way to end that first half of the season, with win over Canadians, who had already beaten the Lightning twice from the same division. But the Edmonton Oilers are certainly a team that the Lightning could be facing if they make it to the promised land, that is the Stanley Cup Finals. And Edmonton's certainly going to be a team that'll have to go through. The Western Conference champions last year, and they currently employ the leading goal scorer in Leon Draisaitl, as I previously mentioned, only scorer in the NHL with 40 or more goals so far this season. He is the goal-scoring leader. Braden Point has 31, so not too far behind Draisaitl there. And obviously, it wouldn't hurt Point's Rocket Richard chances if the Lightning can hold Draisaitl scoreless. And then there's always the fun little rivalry aspect. Connor David and Nikita Kucherov are two players that immediately pop up when someone asks the question, who is the best player in the NHL right now? And I feel like that has kind of blossomed into a friendly rivalry in a similar way that it's done with Nikita Kucherov and Nathan MacKinnon, particularly after that Stanley Cup final that the Avalanche took over the Lightning in 2022. So there's always that fun little rivalry about who's the best, and then with Point trying to gain ground and maybe get himself on the Rocket Richard watch list with 9 goals behind Leon Draisaitl currently in that. But, I like the whole best player rivalry, Messi versus Ronaldo, Manning versus Brady, Kobe versus LeBron, Jordan versus Kobe. I mean, the list can go on in so many different sports. I mean, hockey, all the greats that Wayne Gretzky played against. I mean, we can keep going on this, but when you have those kind of matchups, I think it's good for the game. It's really good to see top players try to take it to another level when they're challenged by other top players in the league, especially players that might be coming for their spot, in terms of Leon Draisaitl looking down at Point in the scoring race, and Nikita Kucherov and Connor McDavid in the who's the best in the world battle that they're seemingly constantly in. So I think that game against the Edmonton Oilers is really, it's one of the few games in the Western Conference where, you're really thinking, okay, we could see these guys in the Stanley Cup Finals. These guys are big contenders. These guys have some top players that we just want to show that we can shut down. And I think showing that the Lightning can beat one of the best offenses in the NHL would certainly look good for Tampa Bay, as their defense has been a weak point all season. That they've struggled at times against these high-powered offensive attacks like the Oilers have. And really in the second half, the Lightning are in a position where they kind of need to solidify themselves as a playoff team. They've kind of been mostly in, but a little bit in and out of that playoff contention through the last couple months of the season. And I think they really just need to start off with some really strong games. You look at on paper, those games against the Flames maybe, and definitely the one against the Kraken, are games that you'd expect the Lightning to win. On paper, the game against the Orioles, the Oilers, the Lightning will not be favored. And most people will be expecting the Oilers to win. And it's those kind of victories, especially at this point in the season, that can prove the difference between a contending playoff team and a team that just happens to make the postseason. And the Tampa Bay Lightning are more than that. It was a tough exit early on against their rivals in the playoffs last year against Florida. But, the regular season games a lot of times are kind of discounted when it comes to the playoffs. The clock resets. It's a whole new season, and it's just all about the postseason. But I think that there are definitely that you can definitely keep some momentum from a big regular season victory, and the Lightning turning around from a 2-1 loss, a game that they certainly felt that they had a chance in, that they could have won, coming back around in the next time and taking down one of the best teams in the NHL at home would certainly draw some momentum for the Tampa Bay Lightning over the course of the season. And over the course of the season, some Lightning players have done a good job of drawing some momentum. We're going to take a look at some unsung heroes for the Bolts in the first half of the NHL season. So we did some player grades earlier on towards the midseason. We've talked a little about some of the unsung heroes, and I think for me, the easiest name to mention is on defense in Darren Radish. I just think the contributions that he has made to the Tampa Bay Lightning, whatever line he is on, have been really impressive. He's +3, not really being on any kind of set line for the Bolts until J.J. Moser went down. And I haven't heard much about JJ. The rumor is that he is expected to come back close, if not immediately after the Four Nations break. So Darren Radish might be going back down to his kind of utility defenseman point, where he'd sometimes switch off with Perbix or Lilleberg on the Lightning's third defensive line. But he also would be the seventh defenseman when the Lightning went with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen. So really kind of playing a good utility role. But no matter where Radish has been in the Tampa Bay Lightning lineup, he has been an important part of not just the defense for Tampa Bay, but also the offense. No Lightning defender has scored more goals than Darren Radish this year. He has 3. Only Victor Hedman has scored more goals. He has 8. No other Lightning defender aside from Radish has more than 4. That's Nick Perbix. So Radish, one of the leaders in goal scoring and assists as well for Tampa Bay. Radish is 7th on the team. The only defenseman with more assists is Victor Hedman. So the second highest scoring defenseman is Darren Radish. And he's also been a huge impact maker on the offensive side. I think he is one of the best offensive defensemen behind Victor Hedman for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And he's been one of the reasons the Lightning have put themselves in such a good position. I think the other guy who certainly needs a lot of credit is going to be Nick Paul. And I don't know if he is unsung enough among Lightning fans to be kind of considered an unsung hero. Paul has been with the Bolts since the trade deadline of the 2022 season, playing the final 21 games, going from a -18 plus-minus with the Ottawa Senators to a +4 in 21 games, the Lightning 5 goals and 9 assists. And he has been a regular player for the Tampa Bay Lightning over the past 3 seasons, with over 80 games played in 2022 through 2024. He may miss that mark because of some early injuries this year, but when Nick Paul was healthy, he was utterly dominant on the Lightning offense. He is the leading goal scorer outside of what's really been the big 5 or 6 for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Big 5, I guess, for the Lightning, is Paul 7th on the team in points. He is 4 goals away from becoming the Lightning's 6th 20-goal scorer. And assists-wise, he is 9th on the team as well. So Nick Paul has really, done everything. People you look at the defensive forwards on Tampa Bay. You think of Brandon Hagel. You think of Anthony Cirelli. Controlling the puck with their speed, knocking the puck away with their active hands on defense, and just being active in the passing lanes in the defensive zones. But Nick Paul has been every bit as solid a defenseman from the forward lines as those other 2 guys are. And offensively, he has been the top, scoring chance producer outside of the 5 20-goal scorers for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And especially since Paul has frequently played on the third line for the Bolts, it's huge, because the one thing Lightning have needed the most from the lines under their top six have been productions from the bottom six guys. And from the guys who have played in the bottom six so far this season, Nick Paul has really been just the leading goal scoring producer, and with his ability to play two-way as well. It's just phenomenal. And it seems like whenever the Lightning have a forward injury, whenever they need to move guys around, it's usually Paul that's moved around. He's really a team player. He can play just about anywhere on the ice and willingly plays with anybody on the ice. A guy that has also been moved all around those bottom six lines is Mitchell Chaffee. Nick Paul typically gets up to the second line. He plays either on the second and third line. Chaffee has gotten up to the second line on a couple of times, but he has been one of the bigger surprises of the Lightning season, primarily playing on the third and fourth lines. After 30 games, the Bolts last year, he already has set a career high in goals, assists, points, games, just about everything. First 3 power play goals of the season have been scored this year as well. First 2 game winners, and he's won a couple of faceoffs, 40% so far. First faceoff wins of his Lightning career as well. And Mitchell Chaffee is someone that was really an under-the-radar guy, an undrafted free agent at 27 years old. The Lightning signed him in 2023. But he, just wasn't a guy that was expected to make a huge impact. And I think in a lot of ways he has made a big impact. Chaffee has in the top 5 on the Lightning in terms of hits by a forward. Mikey Asimon is a guy who's up there as well. Connor Geekie, another guy who's been dealing out the hits, but so is Mitchell Chaffee, for a guy who is on the smaller side. Still pretty big, though. I mean, deceptively small, I'd say, at 6'1", 204. But, he's a big guy, can lay the lumber down, and his everything on offense is absolutely improved. His stick checking is great. He can get in solid positions on both the offensive and defensive side. And he has been a big surprise for the Tampa Bay Lightning this year, and been one of the more consistent producers on the lower lines. He's not a guy who you're going to expect to pop off for multiple points on a given night, but he can slide in a helper every now and then, put a goal in the net on the offense side, and has really turned into a dependable guy who can play both wings and can rotate under any line. So he has been, I think on offense, Mitchell Chaffee has been the biggest unsung hero. I mean, you look at the guys like Brandon Hagel, who has been a huge piece in the Lightning's offense. Anthony Cirelli, obviously that entire first line. And you talk about Nick Paul as maybe outside of the top 6, maybe being the biggest weapon that the Lightning have on the third line and below. But Mitchell Chaffee is looking like a bit of a weapon as well. Just a really smart hockey player who does the fundamentals right, does the little things right, and that's why he has played his way firmly into the Tampa Bay Lightning lineup. And another guy who might not be an unsung hero status just yet, but is doing the same thing, is Gage Gonzalez. I think you looked at some of the Lightning rookies, and guys like Connor Geekie were the first ones that came up to mind. And Gage Gonzalez was a player that had been on the cusp of coming up in the NHL, even made his debut last season with a couple of games. He has already long surpassed that debut, averaging almost 2 full minutes more time on ice than he did in his first 2 games of the Bolts last year. And now through 33 games, he has a goal and 6 assists with a plus or minus of +3, only 4 penalty minutes, a power play assist. And Gonzalez finished off with an assist in 4 of his last 5 games. So 4 of the 5 games he has played in the month of February. Now, I think the shooting still needs to really ramp up a little bit. I think that is the weakest part of Gonzalez's game, but he is a very smooth passer, solid stick handler, really quick on the ice as well. And he really looks like he is growing into a strong player. I thought that at the beginning of the season that I'd be most impressed by Connor Geekie when it came to Lightning rookies, but especially after his second stint in the AHL, after he got called up for the second time, he is vastly improved. Gonzalez has been kind of sent up and down from the AHL this year, and it seems like this most recent move is his move to stay, because he has not played better hockey in the NHL than Gonzalez has in the month of February. 4 assists in 5 games, a guy who is just getting better every game, learning. I mean, and you can tell, he's out at practice, usually at the front of the pack, It just really shows that he's a hard worker and that he's really trying to make a name for himself in the NHL. And I think he has. I don't think I'd put him on an unsung hero just yet, but when we have this conversation again at the end of the season, Gage Gonzalez might certainly be out there. He is a player I will be watching very closely for the Lightning in the second half because I think he can make a big jump in the next couple of years and turn into a really solid line 1 or line 2 guy, maybe at right wing, at center. I mean, that's where he can typically play, but Gage Gonzalez is certainly one of the younger players on the Lightning to keep an eye on as the Lightning move forward. And we'll keep an eye on Four Nations tomorrow. We'll preview the championship on tomorrow's show. But until then, I want to thank all of you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, make sure to check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And on YouTube or wherever you listen to this podcast, make sure to give us a follow, a like, and subscribe. We really do appreciate your guys' support and your commitment to watching this podcast. So thank again for watching today's show, and we'll talk tomorrow. Until then, have a great day and go Bolts.